In this video, we are going to answer the question, who approved the Aratina solar project? Aratina is a solar project in the Mojave Desert, which has been approved to bulldoze nearly 4,000 old-growth Joshua trees and replace them with solar panels. Each one of those blue dots is a mature Joshua tree. Many are over 100 years old, but there are more than just trees here. There are hawks and bobcats and snakes and other wildlife. We call this a forest. People live here as well. The town of Boron is directly downwind from the solar farm. The solar panels will be built just feet away from the residents, including the Boron High School. Dust will cover the town for decades. The forest has always provided a natural windbreak for the residents, but it will soon be bulldozed, exposing the residents to valley fever. You're probably thinking, I thought Joshua trees were protected. Yes, Joshua trees are on the California Endangered Species list. But as we shall discover, there are many loopholes. In this video, we will reveal the actual documents and online meetings which led to the questionable approval of Aratina and allowed them to bulldoze a protected Joshua tree forest. Let's start by taking a look at the Joshua tree's habitat. Joshua trees were once a wide-ranging species, thriving across the southwestern United States. They could be found all the way south into northern Mexico at sea level. As the climate got hotter over the last 12,000 years, Joshua trees retreated to the cooler high desert. Now, the last remaining Joshua trees live primarily in the Mojave Desert. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife published a survey of the remaining range for Joshua trees. Red indicates a dense Joshua tree forests. As you can see, there are only a few areas of dense Joshua tree forest remaining. Clearly, it makes no sense for Aratina to be cutting down a Joshua tree forest with nearly 4,000 mature Joshua trees. The Mojave Desert has traditionally been treated like a wasteland, and the iconic Joshua trees are treated like weeds. From 1945 to 1960, over 100 nuclear bombs were detonated in the Mojave Desert. Their nuclear fallout spread for hundreds of miles in every direction. The Mojave is also home to the largest open-pit borax strip mine in the world. Recently, wildfires have ravaged the Mojave Desert, killing millions of eastern Joshua trees in just a few days. And now, the solar industry has begun bulldozing the Mojave Desert, along with every Joshua tree in their path.
Joshua trees are torn down to make way for solar projects. 23 ABC's Cassie Carlisle travels to the Mojave Desert to talk to neighbors.
It makes me sick.
And we don't know what to do about it. We're outgunned with a billion-dollar company.
They're clearing them off, killing them real quick, and now they're grinding them up, getting rid of all the evidence.
But residents are concerned that more solar projects could come into the area in the future, saying someone has to speak up for the trees.
The Mojave has been ravaged for decades by strip mining, nuclear testing, urban development, the solar industry, valley fever, wildfires, and the recent drought in California. As a result, Joshua trees are in sharp decline. In fact, there are significantly fewer Joshua trees than there were just a decade ago. Since Joshua trees grow very slowly, only about a foot a decade, their ability to recover is diminished as well. Joshua trees cannot grow back in a few seasons like other plants. The creation of a Joshua tree forest takes centuries. In 2019, UC Riverside forecast that, due to increased temperatures, the Mojave Desert habitat will no longer be viable for Joshua trees as early as 2100. This is what is known as an extinction event. The solar industry has taken a significant toll on the Joshua tree habitat. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife prepared an official study of the western Joshua trees as part of their review process. It lists both threats and protections for the species. Here is a direct quote from that study. Quote, "Between 22 and 42% of the habitat within the southern part of western Joshua Tree's range may be lost by the year 2095 due to urban growth and renewable energy development." Note, the southern range includes Kern and San Bernardino counties. How many trees have been bulldozed by the solar industry? The Joshua Tree study did not publish this information, even though it is readily available to them. It is a glaring omission on their part. But some data was exposed. Here, they report that over 200,000 Joshua trees were destroyed in Kern County by just 11 solar projects. There have been many attempts to protect Joshua trees over the last decades. This is the main list. But, as we shall see, every one of these protections has a backdoor. We will review these one by one and show how Aratina was able to bypass each one. In 1977, the California Desert Native Plants Act named Joshua trees as a protected species. But this legislation has a fatal flaw. It leaves protections and enforcement to local municipalities. This means that each county can decide their own regulation and enforcement policies. As a result, many desert municipalities simply did not implement or enforce any regulations for Joshua tree removal. We can confirm this in the California Department of Fish and Wildlife study. Here is their official statement regarding Kern County protections for Joshua trees. Note, Aratina is located in Kern County. The study finds, quote, "The Kern County Code of Ordinances does not provide any protection for western Joshua trees. In general, tree removal is not prohibited. In 1994, the California Desert Protection Act was voted into law. This monumental act of legislation created Joshua Tree National Park, Death Valley National Park, and the Mojave National Preserve. While the Desert Protection Act created these parks, it did not provide actual protections for the Joshua tree species in local communities. So, the Desert Protection Act has no enforcement power over Kern County. Since 1994, destruction of the Mojave Desert has only increased. In a sad twist of irony, creating the national parks, as we shall see, only accelerated the destruction of the Joshua tree species by local governments. In a final attempt to define enforceable statewide protections for the Joshua tree species, a proposal was made in 2019 to put western Joshua trees on the California Endangered Species List. The California Endangered Species List is the gold standard for protections worldwide. This process took over a year and prompted the largest public response to any previous endangered species hearing. Hundreds of local citizens called in to support the protection effort and to provide examples of the needless destruction of Joshua tree habitat in many local communities. Here are President Sklar's comments at the conclusion of the hearing.
Okay, thank you all very much for your detailed and important comments. I do want to say to the local officials that we've heard some testimony today, and I've seen some evidence of the fact that makes me question whether local authorities have done their job in protecting this plant. Those local authorities are going to need to commit to and demonstrate a real effort to protect these plants already protected. It is disturbing, some of the things we've seen and heard about what's been allowed to happen. It's very upsetting and not going to be okay going forward.
On September 22, 2020, in a 4-0 vote, western Joshua trees were put on the endangered species list under what is called a candidate species.
The species under CISA is under the code provision is declared to be a candidate species, and candidate species receive full CISA protections.
On September 22nd, when western Joshua trees were put on the endangered species list, they immediately received enforceable protections across the entire state, superseding all local and county regulations and halting all clear-cutting of Joshua tree forests. Joshua trees had finally received the protections they needed to survive. Or so we thought.
Okay, so I just want to welcome everybody back to the September 22nd special meeting of the California Fish and Game Commission. We're on item number 4.
For purposes of today, I am asking for your support for the emergency rule that's narrowly tailored to 15 important energy projects in California. And with that, I'll stop and take any questions you might have.
As soon as protections were in place, California Department of Fish and Wildlife Director Bonham invoked the rarely used emergency rule to demand that 15 solar projects be allowed to bypass all newly created Joshua Tree protections. Director Bonham provided no hard information about the projects, yet he demanded an immediate vote. There was no due diligence done by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife in qualifying the projects on the list. This was simply just a wish list of projects submitted by the solar industry, and Bonham wanted them approved. How do we know this? Listen.
I was told late yesterday that despite that proposal and that list of projects, one of the projects, the Daggett project, actually does not have Joshua trees on the project site, and so does not need to be included in the list and in the regulation.
So, when presented with this wish list, no one from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife bothered to ask the question, how many Joshua trees are on each project? 100? 1,000? 10,000? None? 2. Director Bonham and the solar industry representatives were demanding a vote that day on what they called shovel-ready projects. Here are comments from the solar industry.
The emergency regulation is necessary to ensure that these shovel-ready projects can continue to completion.
We do urge the Commission to act on this item and adopt the emergency regulation today,
to ensure that these shovel-ready projects can continue to completion.
It's critical that the regulation be adopted as an emergency regulation today.
Aratina was on the top of the list of shovel-ready emergency projects. That was in 2020, and now in 2024, Aratina has just started building up their area of operation. Clearly, Aratina was not shovel-ready, but again, Director Bonham pushed them through literally, sight unseen. Not all of the committee members were okay with the emergency order. Vice President Samantha Murray had a few questions, as did we.
Great. Thank you, Director Bonham, and thank you for your incredibly diligent work on this. I know this was a really complicated one, and I invite my fellow commissioners to ask any questions or make any comments to Director Bonham, or we can do that after public comment. Vice President Murray, please.
Can you tell us anything about, so I reviewed the 2084 proposed regulatory language that you shared with us, and of course, we don't get to see the regulatory or environmental review documents that go along with those, right? I understand they're all in a state clearinghouse somewhere, but I'm not able to get a sense from the draft language, for example, where are these projects, right? I know they're in San Bernardino and Kern counties, but I don't really have a sense of where. Can you tell us anything about the scale, the megawatts that we're going to see from these projects that will really make a dent in our RPS goals? That would be helpful to know. I guess I'll just start with that.
Okay. I don't have a precise figure for you.
Yeah, I have a couple more questions, if that's all right. So the draft 2084 doesn't have any minimization or avoidance language. But it also looks like so when the tree census report comes to the department, it doesn't look like there's a clause that says the department can go back to the project proponents and say, well, this is a lot of trees. Could you try to do the project in a way that takes fewer trees?
Because it's a very unusual circumstance we're in.
Yeah. It's incredibly difficult for me to approve this proposed emergency regulation without being able to do sort of a cost-benefit analysis where I can consider, for example, specific locations. Are all these projects sort of lumped together, or are they a checkerboard and we're going to be also creating edge effects? I don't really know the quality of the Joshua tree habitat. I don't know the number of trees that are likely to be taken. I don't know the megawatts proposed for each project, right? For example, if there was a project that was going to contribute a lot of energy and take very few Joshua trees, that would be a no-brainer. But if one of these projects is going to take a whole lot of Joshua trees and not contribute that significantly, that would be different. I do wish we had avoidance or minimization clauses in this 2084, including when the census report comes back saying there will be a large number of individuals taken, to vote with the data that I have before me and with my conscience. So this is a really tough decision for me.
Director Bonham provided no additional project information in response to these basic questions, nor did he modify the order to impose any limits. Yet he demanded an immediate vote.
Commissioner Hustler-Carmison? Aye. Commissioner Silva?
Aye.
Vice President Murray?
Respectfully, no.
President Sklar?
Aye. So the motion passes 3-1. And we want to, that really concludes our meeting for today. I want to thank everybody for their input.
So Joshua trees went from 0 protections to 100% and back to 0 in one meeting. This is why people are confused about Joshua tree protections, especially when homeowners are fined when they need to remove a few trees. But solar projects can bulldoze an entire forest, sight unseen. Let's drive to the Aratina project to see why they couldn't avoid cutting down a protected Joshua tree forest. Aratina will literally overshadow the small town of Boron, California. It is a 40-mile drive from Barstow, west on Highway 58. During this 40-mile drive, you will see miles and miles of grasslands, not a Joshua tree in sight. From Kramer Junction, turn right onto 20 Mule Team Road, which takes you directly into Boron. Note the hill in the background. That is Edwards Air Force Base. That is how you know you are in Boron. Do you see any trees? We tried to drive down the road to Aratina, but there is a guard truck blocking the entrance. Now, as you cross the railroad tracks, look to your left, and you will see an actual forest of Joshua trees. That is the center of the Aratina project. There are 4,000 mature Joshua trees emanating from that area. Pause and take a picture. Aratina is about to start bulldozing this protected forest. Now, if you continue west on the 20 Mule Team Road for a few miles, again, there are no Joshua trees. It's all grasslands for at least another 20 miles. Why is Aratina building a solar farm right in the middle of a standalone protected Joshua tree habitat when it is surrounded by grasslands for 20 to 30 miles in every direction? First and foremost is because Director Bonham gave Aratina a sight unseen emergency approval. Samantha Murray asked all of the correct questions. If Director Bonham had truthfully answered her questions, or provided any project data, or imposed normal limits on the 15 projects, we would not be losing this forest.
But if one of these projects is going to take a whole lot of Joshua trees and not contribute that significantly, that would be different. It doesn't look like there's a clause that says the department can go back to the project proponents and say, well, this is a lot of trees. Could you try to do the project in a way that takes fewer trees?
The California Department of Fish and Wildlife gave Aratina approval on a 3-1 vote, with no documentation, sight unseen. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife should drive down to Boron and take a look at the Aratina project firsthand. Clearly, they have not seen it before. The Aratina solar project will create a lot of dust. The solar farm will be built directly upwind of Boron, just feet from the Boron High School. Prevailing winds will blow dust onto the town and its residents for decades. When large-scale construction sites disrupt the topsoil, they release long dormant microbes which can cause valley fever for downwind residents. Valley fever has been a major health issue in Arizona over the last decades. But in 2017, California surpassed Arizona in the number of confirmed cases of valley fever. The old-growth Joshua Tree Forest has created a natural windbreak for the town for decades. Once the forest is bulldozed by Aratina, the town will have no defenses against the dust or valley fever.
Valley Fever Awareness Month in Kern County. And as we look towards next month, it comes at a time when health experts are reporting a dramatic spike in valley fever cases here in the Southern Valley.
Valley fever is a fungal infection that spreads through kicked up dirt, which resides primarily in the southwestern United States. At the county supervisor meeting today, VFI CEO Scott Thigerson spoke on data with Kern County infections.
When you think of 38 million people in California and our 910,000 people in Kern County, yet we have a third of all of the state's valley fever cases right here in this community.
Public Health says more than 3,000 cases were found last year, and halfway into 2024, Kern County is on track to exceed those numbers.
Why is the Aratina project built so close to this town? Why is Aratina allowed to be built with people living in their dust zone, just feet away from the solar panels? The reason that Boron is treated so poorly is because Boron is located in an unincorporated area of Kern County. The residents of Boron have no say in these matters. All of these decisions are made at the county level. Kern County supervisors voted 5-0 to approve the Aratina project, ignoring the concerns of local residents.
I'd like to know, how will you prevent valley fever and other health problems caused by unhealthy air quality in our vulnerable population? Why hasn't a health impact been done? These questions should have been answered a long time ago. We all know there's dust out there, and disturbing the desert's going to make it worse. Why hasn't there been a health assessment done? Why is there a state policy to protect workers from valley fever and not the communities? You know, they're protected, but the people who have to live with it for the next 40 or 50 years, we're not protected? It's not fair at all. Consider our health.
Solar farms need water, lots of water. One of the main reasons Aratina is located near Boron is because they wanted to take the town's water. But the Boron Water District said no. Aratina has still not found the water it needs to begin operations. It is illegal for Aratina to use water from personal wells for commercial use, or to truck water in from another county's wells. Without water, they cannot start bulldozing the Joshua Tree Forest. We are tracking this issue closely. The solar industry has been bulldozing the Mojave for over a decade, evading Joshua Tree regulations as soon as they are established. You've likely heard claims that we must sacrifice Joshua trees to save the planet, or we must choose between Joshua trees and jobs. This is simply propaganda from the solar industry, created to justify their actions after the fact. There are also discussions of saving the forests by transplanting and relocating the Joshua trees. This is just greenwashing by the solar industry. Referring again to the official Joshua Tree study, the only reference to transplanting in the study cites an instance where over 1,400 trees were transplanted. After just 2 years, 64% of the trees were in poor health or dead. Planting young seedlings to grow a new forest has an even higher failure rate. After the Cima Dome fire in the Mojave National Preserve, which killed 1.3 million eastern Joshua trees, the replanting effort had an 80% failure rate, in what can only be described as a well-funded, science-driven effort. Decades of experience have shown that we cannot create a Joshua Tree forest in a test tube. The best way to save a Joshua Tree forest is by leaving it alone. There are lots of other places to build solar farms, on rooftops, and on already disturbed land. The residents of Boron don't want Aratina. They don't want to live in its dust, and they don't want valley fever. There is no reason this Joshua Tree forest must be bulldozed. The world is watching as the solar industry bulldozes yet another Joshua Tree habitat. There is a petition set up on change.org to tell Aratina to stop. See the link below. The petition was started in June and already has over 50,000 signatures. Please sign the petition today. There's also an email template set up so that you can send an email to all of the people who approved this project. Let them know that the world is watching them, and Aratina as well. Also, you can subscribe to be notified of upcoming action plans. See links below.